Muted. Good morning. Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We're going to give it, I think, 1 minute and then get started. We had a lot more people register, so we're going to wait 1 minute and then I'll get started at like 10:02. But thanks for being here. And if you're here for the training related to writing, you are in the right place. Everybody, my name is Ann. I work at MSU Extension as the Learning and Talent Development Specialist, but my previous career was actually teaching English, and I actually have taught writing before at MSU. So this is a topic that when Sarah asked me to do, I was like, yeah, no problem. I've done lots of that. And I'm glad that you've joined me today. I will say that in this session, there are going to be breakout rooms. So at some point you are going to be expected to talk. You don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to, that's fine. But there is going to be participation. So just, I guess, expect that if nothing else. And I think we're going to get started. It looks like we've got a pretty good group here. We're going to do some introductions in small groups in a minute, but I just wanted to just jump in and give you a little bit of information on how people answered the survey. Whenever I do a training, the first thing I find out is basically who's going to be there and what their needs are. So I had asked during the registration process a couple questions, and one of the questions was basically what type of writing do you need to do, and I got a lot of response of reports, articles, quite a bit on social media, which that actually might end up needing to be a whole new training because that's a whole topic to itself, and then newsletters. So those are the types of things that I got a lot of responses to, and maybe one or two answered grants as well. And then the other question I asked people was, what is your biggest struggle related to writing? And these are the answers that I got for that. So you can see the word concise is really big and audience is pretty big. So we're going to talk a lot about those things because certainly being concise when you're writing is very, very important. And I want to start with this idea right here. Oh, it's not advancing. There we go. This idea right here, that good writing is rewriting. And people often say, well, I'm not a good writer. It's just not something I'm good at. And I can argue with that. And I can say, actually, anybody can be a good writer. So I'm going to launch a poll here and ask you guys, when you're writing something like that's shorter, maybe a one-page article, for an example, how many times are you rereading what you wrote and making changes? So go ahead and answer that. All right, we've got just a couple more answering. We're most of the way done. Okay, most of you have answered. So go ahead and sneak in your answer if you haven't right now. I'm going to end the poll. All right, so here's the results. Great. A lot of you guys are rereading it 3 times or more. That's excellent. That's what you should be doing. If you're rereading it much less than that, then you're probably missing some improvements that you could make to your own writing, or maybe you're just an incredibly awesome writer, one of the two. But yeah, good writing is definitely rewriting. Let me close out this poll and continue here. So if you think about writing, it is a process. And these are the different stages of the process. And different people get stuck at different spots in the process, right? So pre-writing is what you're doing before you start to write. So imagine you're trying to get groceries, right? And you have 900 things that you need, or not 900, maybe 17. If you don't write them down in a grocery list, you're not going to have good results, right? It's kind of the same way with writing. Before you start writing, it's a really good idea to do some type of pre-writing. That can be whatever you want it to be. It can be picking up a pencil or pen or keyboard and just starting to write without much plan, just to get the words flowing. It can be making an outline. I tend to like to make bulleted lists, or when I write, sometimes I will make the headings first for the different sections and then start writing under each heading and then kind of move the paragraphs around into a good order. Or it could be talking to somebody. So if you're in the pre-writing stage and you're writing on a topic that you're not really sure what to say, just talking to a colleague that knows about the topic and that also understands your audience. just having that conversation, that's pre-writing. So all of these things make it a better writing. And then drafting is just like Nike says, it's just do it, right? You get in there and you start writing, and it's probably not going to be good. The first draft usually is not good, and that's fine. It's just starting with something. And then going back to revise it, thinking about really content and organization. So revising is just that part where you're getting feedback on it. And if you're lucky enough to have somebody to give you feedback, that's great. Or just rereading what you've written, thinking about what is it my audience is going to want to know, and am I answering those questions, giving them that information. And then also looking at the logical organization. So that's revising. Feedback is just like it sounds, and that's basically just making the point that at some point before the end of the process, and by the way, that could be done way at the end after editing, but you want to get somebody's opinion on it. And then the last stage, of course, is editing. And that's all the picky stuff. That's the grammar, that's the spelling. That's the stuff that, quite frankly, there's a lot of tools to help you with, and we're going to talk about some of those tools. So when we're talking about the writing process, that's just the super quick overview of what it looks like. All right, so when we're thinking about audience and style, these things are all related. So why you're writing something, who you're writing it to, that's going to impact the style in which you're going to write. So what are some different reasons that we write? Go ahead and put in the chat what some purposes are for writing. So why would you write something? You can think about your professional context, maybe. So what's your purpose when you're writing? To educate, to inform, to educate, right? To get somebody to do something, to convince somebody, to persuade. Good. All right. So you guys have to entertain. Yeah, absolutely. Entertaining's, to request assistance. That's an interesting one. That's more of an email function, but absolutely. So here are the big categories that when you read, anything about writing that people say most things fall into. And probably with your work, probably a lot of what you're doing is informing or explaining, but some things might fall into those other categories. So if you think about the style that you're using, it really is influenced by who you're writing to and why, this idea of purpose. Okay, the one thing that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but a few of you mentioned in the questions that I asked when you registered, basically you struggled with hooking your audience. So we're not going to get deep into this, but I did want to do one example of a very key important point related to hooking your audience into reading. And to begin, I want you to just take a second and read these two paragraphs. Okay, so here's where you can either unmute yourself or you can pop it in the chat. So which one gets your attention more and why? What do you guys think? Ladine says example 2 because it's personal. Right, so the next question is kind of a leading question because the purpose in the audience might influence how you write. But if you're writing to inform, right, example 2 because it's painting a picture, the idea of storytelling or the idea of what I call the human element. If you think about what you remember, you don't remember stats. You don't remember how many people have been affected or the fact that it was the driest year in 127 years. But when you tell somebody a story or when you relate it to some parts of humanity, it triggers different parts of the brain. There's also actually research related to storytelling that looks at brain imaging, and it took two groups. And one group of people, it gave them a bunch of statistics, and the other group, it wasn't statistics, but it was like a story related to the same topic as the statistics. And if you look, I don't have it in these slides. I should have added it maybe, but if you look at the brain imaging, the group that was hearing a story, like all different parts of their brain were lighting up, right? And then for the statistics group, it was just like a couple parts of the brain were lighting up. So yeah, just the idea that making things personal, as Kristen says, or painting a picture, as Keely says, all of these things are going to hook the audience. Now, this often comes to odds with the idea of conciseness, which is something we're going to talk about a lot. So the second paragraph, it's not much longer than the first, maybe just a couple words. It doesn't quite give as much information, but you have to have a balance between hooking people by giving them details that are more personal or storytelling-like, and also keeping things concise so things don't become too long and too wordy. There is a balancing act there. So that being said, we're going to talk next about keeping it concise. And this is something that a lot of you mentioned that you struggle with, and it's definitely something that I see a lot in writing. That I see a lot of writing that's what I call flabby writing. It's got like extra fat in it. It's got stuff you can just cut out. And to begin this section, I'm going to show you some images, and I'm going to basically give you 10 seconds. I don't want you to write anything down. Put your pencils down, put your keyboard down. I want you to try to remember as many as possible. So go ahead and look at the screen and just study these for 10 seconds. Okay. How many did you remember? You don't have to put it on a piece of paper like I said here, just maybe put it in the chat. Or you might want to write down as many as you remembered. So try to recall some items and then put in the chat how many you remembered. Pretty good, Lisa and Brooke. Not bad, Keely. I don't think I would remember more than 5. So yeah, there were, I believe, 15 images. And so it looks like people are remembering about a third of them, okay? So just roughly looking at what's coming in the chat, I'd say that's the average, is people are remembering 33% or so. All right, and there they are, just in case you wanted to think, oh, I forgot about that. All right, next, let's think about this. So look at these for a minute. I'm gonna just give you 5 seconds. All right, how many did you guys remember now? 3, right. You all remembered 3. Really easy. So how does this apply to writing? It's really easy. It's limit what you say to what they care about. So just the whole idea of conciseness is if you give them too much information, they're not going to remember everything. And it's the same with giving presentations, which later with this same group, I'm doing a presentation on giving presentations. And one of the big points there, along with writing, is really figure out what it is your audience cares the most about and just give them that. Don't give them a bunch of extra fluff. They don't care. They're going to remember what is important to them, and that might get lost if that important stuff is, surrounded by a bunch of fluffy stuff or extraneous things that they don't care about. So basically just limit what you say. And so here's a way of saying that with a lot of words. Take away all of the words that are not needed and only use those that you absolutely must use in order to make your meaning clear. Oh my God, that's a lot of words. How can you make this shorter? You can say omit needless words. And this phrase, by the way, is a famous phrase for anybody that teaches writing or English. It's Strunk and White's element of style. And it's one of the biggest concepts in the entire book, is to basically omit needless words, which is 3 words that say the same thing as that big, long, flabby, ugly sentence above it. So we're going to do some practice with writing, and it's going to relate to omitting needless words. Oh, and here's a quote that I like, probably because I like to swear, but no. And I like Stephen King. But the road to hell is paved with adverbs, right? Adverbs are an example of words that are generally not needed in writing. Sometimes we use them in fictional writing because they help paint a picture that's more vivid. But in general, adverbs aren't very functional. And an adverb is something like slowly. It's basically a word that's modifying a verb, right? Okay, so what we're going to do pretty soon in groups, and how many people do we have right now on the call? Maybe, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, maybe we're going to do about 3 groups. We have about 15. Okay, so we're going to take sentences like this in groups. I'm going to give you guys a document in a minute, and you're going to rewrite them. So here's an example. This is 13 words. That's why that 13 is there. How could you rewrite this? Can anybody give me a summary of this that's shorter? You can go ahead and throw it in the chat if you're brave enough to do so. Cheers ran down his dirty face. Yeah, that's very close to what I had in the end. So what I had was close, perhaps a little bit more vivid. I said dirt smudged cheeks, but very, very similar. The child's face is tear streaked, right? So that whole idea of just cutting out words. So this is a skill. It's a skill you need to practice. And it's also time consuming. It's time consuming as heck. I mean, to go through your writing, because how we usually write is how we talk, with lots of words that aren't needed. And so it's time consuming to do this, but it will make your writing better and your readers are going to thank you. So now we're going to have the word cut challenge. I'm going to go ahead and put you into 3 breakout rooms. And in those breakout rooms, what you're going to do is you're going to work on a document I'm going to send you. So give me 1 second. Before you go into the breakout rooms, I want to make sure you can get this document. So in the chat, everybody should have gotten a document. Did you guys get it? Yes, no, maybe so. If a few of you could chime in, that'd be helpful. No. Okay.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Good. So you guys are seeing it now? If you're not seeing it, send me a chat message with your email and I can email it to you. So how's that? I think most of you guys should be seeing it. What we're going to do now, though, is I'm going to put you into a breakout with a couple of people. And let me share screen again really quickly. It's not in full view, but you'll get the idea. And what you're going to do is, here. Sorry about that. Didn't go. Is you're going to rewrite the sentences. So here's an example. There's a sentence there. It's got 21 words in it. And then what I want you to do in your group is rewrite them. And this is a word cut challenge. I want you to make the sentences as short as possible, but you have to preserve all the meaning. You can't get rid of any meaning. So in this example, you could just say he quit school to support his family, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. And then you'd write 7 over here because we're going to kind of make this a contest just to see who can basically who can do the best. So I'm going to put you in breakout rooms now. I'm going to give you 8 minutes, which you should be able to get to most of the sentence, if not all of them. So I'm creating 3 breakout rooms. It's going to randomly put people in them. You should be getting a message asking you to join. And I was just telling Ashley, sometimes Zoom hates me. Today might be one of those days. All right, so if anybody wants to shout out how many words they got this sentence down to, we'll see who got it to the fewest. Or you can put it in chat if you don't want to unmute. Anyone? Bueller? Oh, and
that isn't the document we had.
No, this is not the document that you had?
No, ours started with, he dropped out of school on account of the fact that it was necessary for him to help support his family. That one.
That one. Okay. Yeah, we did that one together as a group. That's why I skipped it.
Okay.
Yeah. He quit school to support his family is what I came up with for 7 words. Did anybody beat that? Beat the Ann? No? Okay. All right. Now let's go back into it. This should have been the second one, right?
No, our agency is seeking proposals.
How did I manage to mess this up? There we go.
Yeah.
Somehow I managed to forget one. How about this one? 32 words. My gosh. Who's got something? Did anybody get less than 10 words? How many words did you guys get? You can put it in the chat. 10, that's good. 11, that's good. All right, I came up with 19, so you guys totally beat me. So do you think that well, you don't have to answer this. This is rhetorical, but make sure you're retaining the meaning of the sentences. But yeah, if you got it down to 10 or 11, that's great. That's just what I did, but you guys very, very possibly are better at this than I am. Here's a really easy, short one. How many words did you guys get this one down to? The sculptures were round in shape and of a bright color. 6. Yeah, that's what I got. The sculptures were round and bright. Yep, that one's pretty easy. All right, how about this one? He didn't feel that the meeting every week to share status reports and communicate project updates was a wise use of time. Yes, I agree with the sentiment of this sentence. Who's got it chopped down to less than 22 words? 7, says Vicky. That's awesome. 14. That's still good. 10. Okay, and I came up with 11. So that's what I came up with. And again, there's no right or wrong answers. This is just an exercise to show you how many words you can cut out of flabby writing. Here's a big long one about scientific writing. How many words did you guys get this one down to? 12. Good. I only got it down to 17. Kyle got it down to 7. Oh my gosh, how did you do that? I want to hear that sentence, Kyle. Or you can type it in the chat. Sloppy scientific writing is frustrating for readers. Yeah, right. You did take out a little bit of the meaning. It's sloppy, like you took out the why. So you took that out, but maybe you're assuming that people will know the why. Then, and that's basically the vocabulary and the facts that it's complex. Good, okay. It was not long before she was sorry that she had said what she said. This is one from Elements of Style, Strunk and White. I totally stole this one. How many words did you guys get this one down to? 7. Good. She soon repented her words. So that was, and again, that's not me, that's Strunk and White. That's like the masters of cutting words. Great. So how about this one? 24 words. How many words did you get it down to? 8. Wow, you guys are good. That's like, it's like a third. I got it down to 13. Good writing depends on strategies and processes any hardworking student can master. So again, there's multiple ways of doing this. Consensus of opinion was that the terrible tragedy was unavoidable or was avoidable. And then I got this one down to 7. Consensus was the tragedy was avoidable. And again, you might have done better than I did, in which case, awesome. So that's just an exercise in conciseness. So that's one of the first commands when you're talking about editing writing, especially writing that has any scientific bent to it. It can be really hard to read scientific writing, so you want to keep it as simple and direct as possible and not have these long, convoluted sentences because your readers will hate you and or they will stop reading. The other thing that you want to think about is, and this is more to retain interest, and so it's not choppy, is the idea of just making things vary in your writing. So the idea of the word variety, here on the left, a zillion ways to say the word variety. And, you can use your thesaurus. Microsoft Word has a thesaurus. It's under the review pane. If you think of the menus at the top, it's under review, or you can hit Shift F7 if you have an F7 key on your keyboard, which laptops don't, but standard keyboards do. And then in addition to words, the idea of sentence variety or sentence variation. So here's different sentences. He ate, a subject and a verb. She looks happy, that subject, verb, and a complement, an adjective to the subject. I won't get into all the technical grammatical stuff. You guys won't care, but she lent money to Josh. You've got subject, object, indirect object, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see there's different formats of sentences, and some of them are very short with just a subject and a verb, and some of them, like the last two, are complex sentences where there's subordinate clauses and main clauses and all this other stuff where you don't need to know any of those words. What you need to take away from this is the fact that there's a lot of different ways to structure sentences. And if you have all sentences that are the same structure, it sounds choppy, it sounds bad. We don't want that. One thing that I tell people to think about when they are writing, if they feel like they're writing too long of sentences or not having enough sentence variety, as I say, just print it out and highlight every other sentence. So here's an example of something that, I don't know, I pulled somewhere off of the web that probably the US government wrote, so I can make fun of it, right? And it's not that terrible. But anyway, I highlighted in yellow every other sentence, and you can see that the sentences they're kind of the same length. So you don't want to do that. So what I'm going to have you do is take this example of writing where the sentences are very similar and it's choppy and they need some word variety and it's a little bit flabby. And I'm going to have you go into your same breakout rooms and I want you to rewrite this paragraph to make it awesome. And we're just going to take probably 4 or 5 minutes to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms again. You guys will be put into the same breakouts. And where did my breakout button go? Here we go. So you're going to be put into the same rooms and you're going to use the same document that you already had before. So the rooms should be opening again. We're going to take 4 to 5 minutes to just quickly rewrite this in our groups. And you can pause the recording if you didn't, Ashley. All right, now it looks like I'm seeing everybody back in. Awesome, welcome back. Does anybody want to be brave enough to copy and paste their paragraph into the chat? See what you did with this. Filter strips are commonly referred to as buffer strips. They are edge of field tracts of vegetated land. Good. Filter strips can reduce the contamination of surface water and can control non-point source pollution. Filter strips can also be, yeah, good. I would say with that first one, make that first comma a semicolon because what you're doing is you're joining 2 sentences. When you're joining 2 sentences that could stand alone, you use a semicolon, but yeah, that's good. You retained all of the meaning. The second one's super short. Filter strips are tracts of land around fields referred to as buffer strips. They reduce contamination, control non. Wow, that one's super concise. Great. So you guys get the idea. And we're going to play around with some tools in a little bit that make some of this style stuff easier because the paragraph that was originally written was perfectly grammatical. It just sounded bad. It was choppy. It was choppy and it used the word filter strips in the beginning of each sentence and the sentences were the same length, et cetera, et cetera. So good. And that's what I did to it here. And I just, highlighted the sentences to show that I tried to include sentence variation. The first sentence is long, the second one's super short, the third one's kind of in the middle. So again, just that idea of variety. Short is better, but it's okay to have some long sentences. The problem is when you have every sentence be long or when the sentence is just hard to comprehend, then it becomes an issue. Right. This one I like to spend a little bit of time on. Passive voice should be avoided by writers. That is an example of passive voice. Does anybody know what I mean when I say active voice, like make this active? Like who's doing the stuff? Who's the doer? Bueller. Nobody's volunteering. Okay, that's all right. I will. So writers, the person doing, yeah, okay, Jake, just you guys put it in. You were just, yep. I didn't wait quite long enough for y'all. You knew what you were doing. Anyway, writers should avoid the passive voice, right? This idea that you don't want to have too much of this. It's called passive voice, where basically the person doing the doing is at the end of the sentence, usually in a by something like, they call that a by phrase. Here's another example, which actually this is a really, I should have switched out this example given what happened on campus last night, but I forgot I had it in here. A really wordy sentence that is in passive voice. And if you rewrite it, it's super short. So the idea that passive voice is one, it's longer, and two, it's really boring because it takes the action out of it by putting the actor at the end. So the idea of trying to avoid that passive voice and make everything active. And again, I'm going to show you some tools that will mark your sentences that are passive, and then you can go in and you can decide, do I really need these sentences to be in the passive voice? Because sometimes you do. And here's some examples of when you might want to have the passive voice. I was robbed. Maybe you want, and that's passive voice because you don't know who was doing the robber. Like the robber is maybe like unknown. They never caught the guy. So you could say someone robbed me, but someone doesn't add anything to the sentence, right? You don't know who did it. So that one, the active voice is pretty, that's cool to use. The second one, I think this is a famous sentence actually from Ronald Reagan that they made fun of him for back in the 80s, but I don't remember the context, but I remember that he basically messed something up. And then in the speech, the sentence he used was mistakes were made. And so why would you use passive voice there? Well, it's because you don't want to admit who did something, right? And then the last one is he was born on Monday. So we don't think about this, but we always use passive voice when we're talking about somebody being born, because who's bearing the child, the mother is, it's obvious. So you don't really need to focus on the doer of the action because it's clear. So those are just some examples of when active voice would be good. We're going to do these as a group in the chat real quick, just a couple of them, not very many, but how would you rewrite this as a active voice? How would you put the doer in the beginning? So congratulating, who's doing the congratulating, that's how you'd start the sentences. So the coach, congratulated the winner of the swim meet. Yep, both of you guys came up with the same thing at exactly the same time. Yep, right, Libby, exactly. And you can see that it makes the sentence shorter. Here's another one. So the people, the actors are the farmers and the landowners. So if you start out with that one, farmers and landowners, and then finish the sentence. Yes, farmers and landowners who participate in this program will receive reimbursement for establishing practices, right? It puts the action in the beginning. It's a more interesting sentence and it is shorter as well. Now this one, who's doing the acting? It's not as clear. You might not know who's doing the acting. And if you don't know who the doer is, you might leave it this way. Any stab at this one? Does anybody know who the actor is? Maybe not. So maybe the landowners, right? So landowners will install field windbreaks according to blah, 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 right? Yeah. And then one more example. So this is an example of kind of the command form. Yeah, Lisa just got the other one. Yeah, windbreaks will be installed according to CPS. So what about this last one? Who's doing the using of the herbicide? You could make it into a command form. You know what a command form is? Be quiet is a command form, right? It's where the subject is implied. So how about, what about if you, this last sentence, you can take it and you can make it into a command. So what would that look like? Just use herbicide to eliminate competing vegetation. Okay, so you're just taking, exactly what Libby says, use herbicide to eliminate competing vegetation, right. So this is an art form, eliminate weeds with herbicide. Yeah, exactly, and that's another command form. It's starting with the verb in both of those. The subject disappears in a command form, like when you yell at your kids, be quiet, because you're on Zoom, which is something I do all the time. Right. Oh, all right. So that's just an example of what passive is, because you do not want a lot of passive voice. Now we're going to talk about some ways to cheat. And there's a whole lot of ways to cheat in writing that are sanctioned and not plagiarism and good. We're not telling you to plagiarize. Don't do that. That would be bad. These are some tools. I'm going to have you actually play around with them and use them in a minute, but I'm going to show you one first. So the three that I have found that I like are called the Writer's Diet, the Hemingway app, and Grammarly. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to share on my browser screen again to show you one of these tools and how they work. And then I'm going to put you in groups to kind of play around with these tools and decide what it is you like and what it is you don't like about these different tools. So here we go. Okay. So this one is called Hemingway Editor. You guys can see it, right? I just want to make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. You see kind of a blank web browser page.
Yeah, we can see it.
Excellent. Okay. So what you do is you just paste stuff in here. Okay, so this is not something I wrote. It's something I stole from, one of the websites for CREP that was probably written by somebody in the government. I don't know. But you can see on the right, first of all, I want you to notice that the grade here is 13. That means it's college writing level. That's probably too high, unless you know everybody you're writing for has attended at least some college, and that probably the writing is too advanced. So that right there is something that would stick out about this piece of writing. You can see the light green, they have highlighted the use of passive voice. They recommend for this length of text to only have maybe 3 sentences, and this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So maybe cut out some of those passive voices. They don't have any phrases, have simpler alternatives. That basically what that means is they're saying you're using too fancy of a word. Use something simpler. And I'm not sure I agree with it, because I think minimum and maximum are pretty simple. So keep in mind, this is a machine. It is not perfect. And when you use these tools, you don't need to listen to everything that they tell you. In fact, don't listen to everything that they tell you, but they do provide some good insight. It shows that those yellow sentences are hard to read. And then look at those, I don't know what color that is, kind of like a peachy, reddish pink. Those 7 of 14 sentences are very hard to read. So in other words, there's a lot of convoluted sentences that you would want to go back into the actual sentence and play that word cut game and try to omit needless words and make them as short as possible. Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you guys an article you can use as an example, but you don't have to use this one. You can actually use any piece of writing that you want. And let me stop share for a minute. So in the chat, there's an example of an article, or if you want, you can go to the CREP website. You guys can go wherever you want, but what I want you to do is find a piece of writing that is similar to the type of writing that you normally do, okay? So you can use whatever you want for that. I can even, if you want, cut and paste some writing. That one that I just did, I'll cut and paste that into the chat. You could even use that. Let's see if the chat will take it. Yeah, you could even use that one that I just put in the chat. But what you're going to do in your groups is you're going to choose one of these 3 tools, and the 3 tools again are Grammarly, Hemingway app, and Writer's Diet. I'm going to put those in the chat as well. Your group can choose any of them that you want. So they're right there in the chat. And then I want you to put some piece of writing, either the one that I put in the chat or whatever you find, through one of these tools and just play around with it, learn to use it as a group. And then when you come back, I'm going to ask somebody from each group to talk and say, this is the type of writing we put through it. This is what it did well, and this is what it did not do well. So I just want you to play with these tools and kind of discover their strengths and weaknesses. And we're going to just take about 8 minutes to do that. So I'm going to put you back into your breakout rooms starting now, and we'll give you about 8 minutes.